Hello mortals, I'm the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And yes, today I'm going to haul more books out of my garage. I have many boxes in my garage filled with books throughout the ages that I haven't sorted through in a long time. So I believe this is going to be my 6th box of books. Hopefully we'll eventually get to the end and I'll have done at least some type of organization. Probably not, but at least I'll know what's in my garage in these boxes of books. Talk about a book haul. Woo-hoo. Okay, so let's get started. I have a box of books open and we're starting off with Mitchell Graham's The Ancient Legacy. And you hear me say this a lot during these hauls. I don't remember reading it. This is the breathtaking conclusion to the epic adventure. So if it's the concluding novel, I'm sure I read the other. So it kept my attention enough to continue reading. Next we have Jack L. Chalker's A Jungle of Stars, and if you know me, you know that I love Jack Chalker, and it's a classic novel, classic science fiction, so I am sure this is one of his early works. Next we have Enterprise, the first adventure by Vonda McIntyre. I honestly don't read that many Star Trek books, but the Star Trek, the original series, is my favorite, and this one has Bones, Spock, and Kirk. And it says it's Captain Kirk's untold story of his first mission. By the way, Vonda McIntyre is one of the better Star Trek writers, her and Diane Duane, I believe. Next we have C.J. Cherry's Hellburner. I don't remember this one, but I bet it is one of her Down Below Station books. And when I say this may be a Down Below Station book, Down Below Station is the first book in the world she created. So anything set in this solar system governmental society that she created in Down Below Station. So I love the copper reflective cover. That's kind of cool. Next we have Legend of Nightfall by Mickey Zucker-Reichert. Now, I kind of remember this series. This is like a assassin, rogue type person who is one of those heroes that's practically unstoppable. And I remember really liking this book. I believe this is a series. But yeah, Mickey Zucker-Reichert wrote one of my favorite series, the Ren-Shay series, which is based on Norse mythology. This isn't part of that series, but if you haven't read this author, check him out. Okay, this is interesting. This is George MacDonald's Lilith. George MacDonald is almost the father of fantasy. He's well before Tolkien, and let's see if it has the year this was written. Okay, apparently this was written in 1895. So it was a big inspiration for a lot of the early fantasy writers, including J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. That said, I did not find this a very enjoyable read. For the history of fantasy, it's an important novel, but I don't think it really holds up. But if you're interested, check it out. But otherwise, I don't really recommend it. Next, we have another C.J. Cherry. Oh, 3 short novels. Alternate Realities, Port Eternity, Wave Without a Shore, and Voyager in the Night. So, again, big fan of C.J. Cherry. If you haven't read her, maybe check out Down Below Station, but my favorite novel or trilogy is Satine. And next we have The Wizard of 4th Street by Simon Hawke. I've totally forgotten about Simon Hawke. He was well known in the 80s. This looks like a contemporary urban fantasy, maybe. Yeah, I have read several things by Hawke, but this one is not really ringing any bells. But if you've heard of him, let me know in the comments. Next we have The Fifth Green by Mitchell Graham. Okay, this is is part of the series of the first book we looked at, The Ancient Legacy. So yeah, I like these books enough that I got the series. Next we have Stanislaw Lem, The Futurological Congress. I haven't read a huge amount of Soviet science fiction, but Stanislaw Lem is probably the biggest name. Next we have, I love this cover. It's has two authors, Roger Zelazny and Robert Sheckley, Bring Me the Head of Prince Charming. So this looks like a fantasy satire. Roger Zelazny, of course, you probably know from the Amber series. Robert Sheckley is a name I'm familiar with, but I just can't think of anything else he's written on the top of my head. But this cover looks hilarious. Next we have a Jerry Pournelle, The Mercenary, which I believe is military science fiction. And I don't remember reading a lot of Jerry Pournelle on his own, but I do like it when he co-authors with Larry Niven, because they wrote a couple of books, but one of my favorites is The Mote in God's Eye. If you're into science fiction from the 70s, that's probably one of the better ones. Next we have Terry Goodkin's Naked Empire. I've mentioned him before. This is part of the Sword of Truth series. I've read quite a few of those, but then got a little bit tired of them. It is epic fantasy. He has gotten some criticism for his libertarian philosophy really overshadowing his stories. But that part didn't bother me. I just felt the stories were getting a little repetitive. Next we have, China Miéville the Scar. I've definitely mentioned China Miéville before, one of my favorite authors who definitely puts the punk in punk genres, and I think he writes in the diesel punk genre. If you haven't read anything by him, check out Perdido Street Station. We have this bookmark here, A. Knopf, The Borzoi Reader. I have no idea what this is about, but it was a free bookmark. Next we have, what do you know, another Jack Chalker book, Priam's Lens. If I didn't mention it, Chalker's probably most famous series, and one I recommend is the Well of Soul series. And it looks like we have I don't know what this is. It's a receipt, but it's not a book receipt. Okay, let's just get this one out. Another Jack Chalker, The Demons at Rainbow Bridge, book 1 of the Quintara Marathon. Ooh, I love this cover too. Again, if you haven't checked out Jack Chalker, check him out. Next we have Don Calendar's Aquamancer. I do kind of remember this series. I think in one of my boxes I pulled out the first book, Pyromancer, and this is one of the sequels, and they're just fun, light fantasy fare. Then we have David and Leigh Eddings, The Redemption of Athalas. Okay, let's talk about the Eddings. Normally they're published under David Eddings. I'm not sure how much Leigh, his wife, was involved in his earlier books, but I really loved the Belgariad. And I read a lot of books by him even after the Belgariad, including this book apparently. But then he wrote a gay character that was very stereotypical that I didn't like, and I stopped reading him. And then I heard after he passed away that it came out that way back in the 70s, he and his wife were accused of keeping their adopted children in cages. Really weird stuff. But I guess I have to say, from at least the Belgariad, he's a very good fantasy author, putting aside his personal shenanigans. Next we have Glenn Cook, She Is the Darkness, another Black Company book. I've talked about this enough. Please read the first series. This is, I don't know, one of the books from the second series. I do like this cover. I'm sure that's Croker and the Lady. If you've read them, you know who I'm talking about. But please start with the first book, The Black Company. Read that trilogy. If you like it, maybe go to some of the later trilogies. Next we have Serpent Mage by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Again, this is a book of the Deathgate cycle. Obviously, this is in the water world of the Deathgate. I've gushed about this series enough that I'm sure you know that. Highly recommend. Next we have Tad Williams' Green Angel Tower Part 2. Look how big this is. I really do like Tad Williams. I talked about The Other Land before. Now this, I believe, let me see if I'm lying. Yeah, this is the part 2 of the third book of his trilogy. So he's writing a trilogy, and I guess his last book got away from him, so it ended up being split into 2 volumes. I think that's happening to George R. R. Martin as well, but at least this series is complete. Next up we have Phil Pullman's second book, The Subtle Knife, the second book of his Dark Materials series. I enjoy the Dark Materials. It starts with The Golden Compass. There's an HBO series out now. It was controversial insofar that it was obviously directed as having some digs at the Catholic Church and its teachings, but that kind of made me like it more. Next up we have Christine Catherine Rush, the final book of The Fae. I don't know what happened to this author, but she is fantastic. I like this Fae series a lot. This is the final book in the series, so of course start with the first book, which is book 1 is The Sacrifice. And it looks like there are 6 books in the series. Highly recommend. Next we have Industrial Magic by Kelly Armstrong. This looks like a contemporary fantasy or supernatural. And what do we have here? We have Eyewitness Travel Guides, bookmarks from Books Inc., the bookstore in San Francisco. And we have another bookmark from Books Inc. I guess I like the bookmark. Oh, here's something a little bit different. A Shirley MacLaine. I love Shirley MacLaine. She's one of my favorite actresses. She's written several biographies, and a lot of it dealing with her spiritual journey, but she's actually a really good writer. And I guess this is one of her spiritual books because we have a little diagram of chakras. Next we have David Brin, The Uplift War. People, if you are into science fiction, you have to read David Brin's Uplift War books. And here it looks like a human maybe surrounded by monkeys. Now, if you don't know what uplift means, every civilization in David Brin's universe, one of their greatest achievements is to raise a lower species up to sentience. And another great thing about this universe is that humans are like minor players. A lot of science fiction, humans are the, big pack in the forest, but in the David Brin universe, they're like the minor players that sort of have to watch out for the big guys. But anyway, the humans have raised, I believe, apes or uplifted apes and dolphins, and that has allowed them to be part of the galactic government or something like that. Anyway, I should reread it, but must read science fiction. Next we have Holly Lyle, Gods Old and Dark. I think I mentioned Holly Lyle before. She is a great craftsperson when it comes to writing. She has a website with writing advice, and she's fairly prolific, and she has some really fun books to read. And this is book 3 of The World Gate, so Again, if it's a book 3, you know, I've read the first 2, and we have a Stacy's bookmark. Next we have another Tad Williams, War of the Flowers, a fantasy. Is this a standalone? I believe this is a standalone novel, and usually he writes series, so a nice thick fantasy having to do with the Fae, or elves and fairies, which is a theme he likes to visit a lot. So, War of the Flowers. Next we have a Martha Wells, The Wizard Hunters, Book 1 of The Fall of Ilrian. I remember this series. I really fell in love with this world, and this is one of those series where I started it in paperback, but I couldn't wait until another paperback came out, so I bought other books in the series in hardback because they were that compelling. But we all know that Martha Wells is a great writer, and we have a Stacy's bookmark. Surprise, surprise. Next we have The Earth Lords by Gordon Dixon. Gordon Dixon is a well-known fantasy sci-fi writer. I believe he's more known for science fiction than fantasy. It's a novel, it looks like, with dwarves in it. Next up is, oh dear, The Hinterland. Now this is why I've stopped reading this author, James Clemens. He writes very successful thrillers under a pseudonym. And I really, really loved his, I believe, Witchfire series, which I've talked about before. And this series was incredible as well, but he got bored and stopped writing them. We'll never know how this series ends. It's called the Godslayer Chronicles. So, also, I think his thrillers were much more lucrative than his fantasy, so I guess he just gave up on his fantasy. Next up, we have another Deathgate series, The Elven Star. I believe this is the air world of the Deathgate. We have a bookmark. Oh, this is so faded I can't even read it. But I can tell you retail, this was $5.50. So, remember when books were that cheap? Now I saved this to the end because I saw this book floating down in this box. This is the last book, but I wanted to bring it out last because it is signed by the author. Yes, I have a signed book of Robin Hobb, The Assassin's Quest. Now I got this from Stacy's bookstore. Obviously they have author signings, and then I guess they have the author sign a whole bunch of books, and they just put them up on the shelves with these stickers signed by the author. So I never actually got to meet Robin Hobb, but if you're curious about her signature, there we have it. And I got this, it appears in 1997, which I'm kind of curious about because on the back it says, from an extraordinary new voice in fantasy. New voice. If you haven't checked out any of Robin Hobb's books, please check out the Farseer trilogy. This is, I believe, the last book of the Farseer trilogy, and that will introduce you into the realm of the Elderlings, and it is quite the journey. Well, that's all I have for this haul of books from my garage. Please go ahead and like this video, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. And let me know down in the comments if there are any books that you saw that you're really interested in reading or that you have read and really enjoyed. Also, let me know what you think of this series because, once again, I still have a lot more boxes in my garage. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.